the anti-India fervor in Bangladesh is really high. So maybe he wants to use that particular, to channelize everybody's energy on that. That may be one aspect. It's also a fact that despite his attempts to initiate meetings at high levels or engage with India, India has been very, very indifferent, if not really staying away from Bangladesh. So those have been issues so far it is concerned. So I'm not really surprised that if he's used the word India or external players. It's a two-way traffic. I mean, India has been annoyed with many of the things that Yunus Interim has done, and the vice versa.
You're on the gist on Strat News Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. Our topic on this edition of the gist is Bangladesh. We've had some developments there, and my guest is Professor Sreeradha Dutta. She teaches and researches on international relations at Jindal Global University. She's also a senior fellow at the National University of Singapore. Sreeradha, glad to see you again.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So we've had some interesting developments Dhaka last night. Apparently, there is now a consensus on elections being held latest by June next year. So, what's your assessment now? Because until now, we have had different views by the other parties. BNP notably, even the NCP.
Yes, so from the very beginning, we've seen that BNP is very keen to hold elections at the earliest possible. I mean, we of course understand that clearly why, because they do, they seem they're going to be in the winning seat. Now, NCP, of course, is very newly formed. And we've also seen Jamaat say that the country is not ready for elections. Now, they are talking about the long term reforms. So many reform commission reports are already in, but
Yeah.
clearly, at this point of juncture, at this point, we've seen that I don't think it's possible for the interim government to, resolve all the outstanding issues, and there are plenty. Also to address all the, commission reports. So I think at this point, what they have decided on, I don't know whether there's been officially mentioned or not. They'll probably look at the short term, the low hanging reforms possible. Of course, electoral reforms, that's top of the list, I would think, under the circumstances. So once that is done, I think then the elected government can take on whatever the larger other issues which remains to be addressed. There is
So
also
in
a
terms,
point about, yeah, sorry, yeah.
yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
No, so there is also issue about how some of the commission work that was being done by the advisors and his team, some of them
Mhm.
had very, I think, consultative processes with all the political parties. But some of the commission, the process wasn't entirely fully all party consensus kind of a thing. So in that sense, they'll probably also have to have a consultation which includes every party. And so once an elected government comes in place, it's probably the parliament is the best place for such debates and for initiating that. So I think at this point, as you say, they've agreed on a kind of a roadmap of a date, a tentative date so far. They would probably then first go in for the electoral reform, which of course is required, without which you can't go for elections. And as we know just now, I think a basic electoral voters list is up in the website as far as I remember, and I think that that's open for several months for the common people and the people to address it in case there's some lacuna and other problems. But also there are other few issues. So let's see how this goes. Yeah.
So, which, apart from electoral reforms, which are the other reforms that could be crucial to the elections going forward?
Uh, that probably is, I think, the main thing. The other issue would be here. Now, again, many months ago, I remember a court ruling which brought in the caretaker government. So
Hmm.
here, as we know, it has been a feature of Bangladesh's constitution in the past. It was done away with by the last Awami League government, where the caretaker government essentially stays there for 3 months and assists the election commission. So
Hmm.
that is a kind of a critical feature of Bangladesh elections, and every political party in the past has always been in favor of the caretaker government. So I think that should be in. In terms of the other the reforms which is necessary. I mean, there are large issues about the constitution and other many other main aspects of running the country. But I think what we have seen being under way, some issues of the banking sector, which is really required reforms. I mean, it was a mess, as we saw when during the Awami League, especially the last couple of years. And economic reforms, I don't think everything that has been tabled by the committee can be undertaken at this point of time. But I think there has been some of these reforms which has been undertaken already and which are underway, probably in some form of the other. Again, as I said, it has to be an all-party consensus around it, and consultative process has to be initiated. Yes.
Sreeradha, I want to come to Mohammad Yunus. Quite a He gets a routinely bad press here, you know. And when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that perhaps it's not perhaps accurate, perhaps not even fair. So, how do you assess this guy? And given the fact that apparently in yesterday's meeting, he referred to a warlike situation and pressure from outside and stuff of that nature. Uh, is he targeting us? What is the issue?
So yes, as you mentioned correctly, India press has always given me a pretty difficult, hard image, and I don't really know why. I mean, one can of course question his political inexperience, and that's a different aspect. And I've also seen many Indian strategic analysts question his Grameen Bank model and all of that. And I don't think we are in a position to question it at all. If Bangladeshis
Yeah.
have wanted it, if Bangladeshis have gained from it, it is their choice, their calling. Who are we to tell anybody that his credit interests are too high and how is this feasible? It's been feasible for Bangladesh, so let them decide what they want about him. But I think the last bit of thing that we've seen about, it's also a fact that he's also been in some form of the other recognized by the our government a few years ago. But right now, the recent bad press is also a bit of a spin-off about how Awami League and Sheikh Hasina particularly looks at Yunus. And I think that has a rub off on India for sure, because I don't remember. And of course, what we've seen some of his positions about northeast India, and the fact that Bangladesh is the only gateway to Bay of Bengal, which is, I think, in incorrect statement to say. And
Mhm.
some of his hobnobbing with Pakistan, though I do agree that it was really Pakistan who really is keen and interested to engage with Bangladesh. So much of that has not, put him in a very favorable light so far as India is concerned. I mean, we clearly don't like the kind of messaging that has happened. But yeah, these are some of the other issues. And we, of course, and I think the large issue really is, Surya, that we feel, and I've heard this from many Indians, that how the interim is a, illegit government. I mean, but that's again something that Bangladeshis have to decide for
Yeah.
themselves. If they have wanted this government, they have wanted Yunus to head it. I don't think we or anybody else should have any right to question it. And I certainly don't. And I think it's been really. I think Indian press and Indians have been very unfair towards him, and I think he deserves better. Again, his political inexperience, yes, maybe that has been reflected in some of the the way the nation, some of the things have been not tackled very well. But that apart, I don't think there's any reason for us to give him so much of flack.
Mhm. So, still with Yunus, there have been reports in the past about his links with various countries, including the US. So, the question is he acting as somebody's behest? Is he his own man? I mean, what does he respond to?
Yeah. So before I forget, you also asked me about what you meant. But you said he had mentioned yesterday about the external power. So I think he was
Yeah.
alluding to India, right? And at this point of time, India, the anti-India forward in Bangladesh is really high. So maybe he wants to use that particular, to channelize everybody's energy on that. That may be one aspect. It's also a fact that despite his attempts to initiate meetings at high levels or engage with India, India has been very, very indifferent, if not, really staying away from Bangladesh. So those have been issues so far it is concerned. So I'm not really surprised that he has used, if he's used the word India or external players, because and also let's not forget the fact that in the aftermath of what happened in August and subsequently, the kind of misinformation and disinformation, and it continues to, even today I've had so many WhatsApp about how the army's taken over all of Dhaka and things like that. So much of that actually, as you, and you're in a far better position than me to say this, much of that emanates from this part of the world, right? So I mean, there are reasons to be a bit suspect about what is happening in this area, and I think we've also allowed a lot of the Awami voices to be heard from our side. So that's something that hasn't also gone down with Yunus. It's a two-way traffic. I mean, India's been annoyed with many of the things that Yunus interim has done, and the vice versa.
I mean, the
And
fact
sorry,
that
you
he,
were talking about, now you were asking about how. So I've always had this take, and we've had many chats on this, as you know, and even previous before all this. I mean, I don't think that it's possible for any external power to, orchestrate the change that happened in August. I'm very clear on that. Yes,
Mhm.
there may have been some support coming in at some point of time. That's possible, but it was certainly from the ground that protest that happened. Now we all know that Yunus has a certain relationship with certain former US presidents and all of that. He's never hid that, never made bones of it. But to say that he's completely controlled by them, I think is certainly not a correct assessment of this gentleman. I mean, he stands on his own right. Yes, he may be friends with them, but to say that what is happening within the interim or in Bangladesh is an external power's influence through him, I think that's a grossly misaccurate understanding of what Professor Yunus stands for.
I mean, the fact that he visits Beijing, he kind of downplays atrocities against Hindus, all these things. Perhaps they all add up somewhere. And the question in India is that, as an interim head, is he really entitled to do these things? These are major foreign policy decisions.
Yes, again, so far as the China visit is concerned, this is a particular conference, as far as I recall, he has been going to for the last 4 or 5 years, if not more. So it was that particular conference that he was attending, where he, of course, met the Chinese leaders there, and I do agree that his talking about inviting China to Lalmonirhat, which is so close to our chicken's neck, and all of that was extremely insensitive. I mean, I
Yeah.
totally get that, and I think anybody should have been cognizant about India's perception of this region. But the fact that you say, and I don't know why we think it's only Yunus who's been engaging or wanting to engage with China. We've seen that across the board with every leader in Bangladesh, whether it was
Yeah.
Haida Zia, whether it was Sheikh Hasina. In fact, the kind of development projects that China undertook with Bangladesh, the largest has been under Sheikh Hasina, of course, because Sheikh Hasina also stayed there for a very long time. But so why don't we think untoward about that? Simply because we thought many of the projects that they do are not going to harm our interest, our security parameters, right? With this
Mhm.
interim, we were not sure what they do, and but I agree with you what you're saying, that is the interim in the position to kind of take these extremely substantial decisions. Now again, I would say this is a part of what Bangladesh has to decide for themselves, and which is why, if you recall the recent controversy about the humanitarian corridor
Yeah.
with Myanmar. I think that was also part of this whole. We've seen the foreign advisor, who's extremely capable person, say that they were going ahead with it. Then we saw Shafiqul again saying that no, 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 this is not something that we would, have decided on. I think then we saw some. I think BNP was, of course, the one who made the biggest noises
Yeah.
about so of course there's certain decisions like this which are substantial have to be done through a consensus platform. Just by the chief advisor taking a decision like that will not go down well. And I think Bangladesh and in general, not only just the political parties, people have reacted to much of that. But again, I don't think there's any particular decision he's really taken as yet. I mean, these are all suggested proposals, projects that we're talking, but I don't think they really signed up on anything with Pakistan or with Bangladesh at this point of time. So
Mhm.
clearly, this is much of a kind of a process. It's not a decision as at this point of time. And I think finally we will probably see elected government to take the call, not really an interim. But again, if the interim does take a call, it is up to the political parties there and the interim cabinet to decide. I don't think India or any one of us should be actually commenting on that. It is their call.
Mhm. Do you think the presence of Sheikh Hasina in India and her occasional comments about the developments in Bangladesh has that exacerbated the Delhi Dhaka relationship?
I would think so, but I've also, in fact, in some of my writing, also argued that you have to also look at it through different silos. I mean, it's a fact that historically we've been connected with the Awami League, going back to Sheikh Mujibur and even earlier,
Yeah.
and then of course, Sheikh Hasina herself, not only when she lived here for 5, 6 years, when she was unable to go back to her homeland,
Yeah.
and then subsequently when she took over in 2009 January, and the kind of engagement that we've enjoyed, clearly India does have a special relationship with Awami League and Sheikh Hasina. There's no denying that. And when Sheikh Hasina sought our help and refuge in India, India was definitely going to give her that support. I mean,
Yeah.
again, there is no two way to that. But at the same time, I don't think that would stop us from engaging with Bangladesh. And but again, I think they would have to make a kind of from both sides a bit of differentiation on this point, that yes, while we support Sheikh Hasina, we support Awami League. At the same time, an engagement can also happen at another silo. And the fact that I said, I mean, and this is something Sheikh Hasina herself has used, various channels of media to voice her opinions about many of the developments that were taking place in Bangladesh, which is certainly not found in good favor in Bangladesh at that point of time. But also the lot of misinformation, and I think was created by Awami League and their supporters, much of which emanated from our soil. So clearly, that didn't also go down well for the Bangladeshis.
So let me ask you, have we handled Bangladesh well? What is your reading in the post Sheikh Hasina's ouster?
I have, of course, I have questioned the kind of indifference that India has shown towards the interim. We may not be happy with the process and what has happened, but again, I would think it's Bangladeshi themselves who has to decide for themselves which leader they want, which government they want, and if they thought that Sheikh Hasina was not, fulfilling her role properly and she needed to be ousted, so that was their decision, not ours to make, right? We have a point of view about her, that's fine. But the fact that we've almost, I mean, again, officially, if you say, people will say, oh, no, no, we've got business going, and the foreign secretary has gone, met the chief advisor, and several other such formal meetings have taken place. The 20 minutes at the sidelines of BIMSTEC meeting also took place. I mean, but these are kind of, I think, just for face value. We've not
Mhm.
seriously, and a couple of the decisions we've done on trade of taking away some of the goodwill gestures that India had earlier granted Bangladesh, to take that away, again, was a strong messaging from India. I mean, again, the point, I'm sorry, I missed about Hindus, and I think the kind of violence that took place against minorities, especially Hindus, was something that really shocked India and the rest of the world. And of course, in the first instances, we did see students and youth leaders, as well as the interim, constantly say that they were not in at all. I mean, they denounced it openly and very clearly. And of course, there were several instances when we saw that the students themselves were trying to support these families and all of that. But it's a fact that and for the first time ever, that of the years that I'm watching Bangladesh, I've seen Hindus do a march in on the streets of Dhaka. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly there's a show of strength, which is absolutely great. But yes, the fact that we thought that the interim administration could have done much more to address this violence against Hindus. I think that's something which has, again, created a lot of anger and disappointment in India, and again, maybe reflected in the way the government has not reached out or not engaged with the interim very, very robustly, I would say. We've kind of, let few things happen. Of course, few medical visas are still being given, but more or less we know it's been the really the minimalist kind of a engagement that we've had with at this point of time. And hopefully things will change with an election coming. Yeah.
Mhm. I want to touch upon this Rohingya corridor, which Yunus, for some reason, was pushing very hard, and then the army chief stepped in and said no. What light can you throw on this?
Yes, I've actually spoken to some friends who've been part of these track two processes and all of that, where basically, I mean, essentially, it was something. I think some multilateral organization, I think, had first initiated the idea because it was in the aftermath of both the earthquake and the problem that was going on the ground continues to be at this point of time, where we've seen how a large number of the Rakhine area where people didn't have cooking gas, they didn't have edible oil, they were not. I mean, they didn't have food to survive, leave alone anything else. So this was essentially thought that this should be, a corridor wherein Bangladesh could send these supplies and support whichever way it was. But as I said initially, the first announcement came from the foreign advisor, and I think the army chief reacted because again on a critical decision like this, which involves another external power,
Yeah.
the army chief not being consulted seemed a little out of place. So I'm not sure who was rushing the decision, but I also know that there was no decision which had been taken. It was just
Mhm.
a process at that point of time, but again on a critical decision like this, a far larger consultative process, and including the army chief certainly should have been part of it. So when he raised it, it was also BNP we saw was the one who really took it to the masses at that sense. And there was generally at this point of time, again, the point that you're saying is the interim, does it have the wherewithal or the capacity to take a call like this? I think that's been the question that most have asked. Yes.
I mean, it
So
also
right
raises the question: who are Yunus's advisors? Who is advising him?
you mean from his own interim in his own team?
Yeah, in
So
his own
at,
interim.
so there is a bit of controversy here, and I'm not sure whether this is a good platform to talk about that, about the appointment of the NSA, who was essentially his I think I'm not sure of the special advisory on Myanmar or something like that. And when he was made the NSA, and Bangladesh has not, I don't think, has an NSA like this earlier. I mean, they've had, but so I think that was probably another reason. Honestly, I mean, while there was these other issues, while it was not consultative and everybody was not on board of it, so you can't announce something, and there were absolutely no formality. The process wasn't really adhered to, but at the same time, I think it was a bit of a controversy because uh, political parties and others have also questioned the NSA's role in this. And I think it was more of a individual attack more than anything else. I think that's one particular aspect which was very prominent when I was watching this particular controversy unfolding.
So, last question, Sreeradha, and this is a little speculative. We have a year to go before elections are held, and what can happen in this interim period? Anything can happen. You think this country is stable enough now? People know what they want. There's a broad consensus after yesterday's meeting about elections and all that.
So that is the best case scenario, that all the parties continue to support Yunus, and they announce a particular roadmap in weeks or months to come, and things fall in place. So it is basically also a matter of law and order. Now, again, we've seen in the past Bangladesh elections have often been violent. And
Hmm.
also, we've
Yeah,
seen, and the last few months, Bangladesh has gone through hugely turbulent times, right?
yeah,
And which is why, again, there has been many have questioned Professor Yunus's ability to, kind of deal with these different, different elements which suddenly the society is seeing, which we hadn't seen before. The different, very strong elements who don't agree with each other. So those kind of things which are now emerging. So I think essentially a law and order situation has to be controlled very strictly. I mean,
mm,
and we've seen some very, for instance, the other day there was this, some Islamist group talked about something very anti-women's commission. The women's commission was instituted by this particular interim
yeah,
cabinet. They had the report in, and I think one of the advisors also mentioned her disappointment that the interim government didn't protest or didn't, say something against that.
yeah.
But my take here is that these Islamist elements who were always there, a part of Bangladesh's social landscape, have suddenly found a voice which they it wasn't there earlier, because there was a system in place and they were not allowed that kind of a
Mhm.
free fair fall kind of a thing. So the more you kind of engage with them, they become louder. So I think
Hmm.
the tactic take at this point of time is to let them say what they want to say. We will go ahead with how we want to do it. Otherwise, and I've always argued this case that Bangladeshi women, will decide what they want for themselves, not because somebody else who, whether it's, Islam, Muslim, I mean, a religious leader or somebody, a male senior in the house tells me to do that. It is because I think it is good for me. And I think that is what has also differentiated Bangladesh, which is a majority Islamic country, from many of the other, including the neighbors that we have. They have
Yeah.
walked a different path. And that's, I think, one of the, I think, the safeguards of the secular or the pluralistic society in Bangladesh that has survived for so long. So while those elements continue to be there, and I think it's difficult and has to be done carefully for the interim to navigate that path, that you
Mm.
don't want to outrightly reject them, because they will, the noise they're capable of making is far louder than any other voice, right? But at the
Yeah.
same time, and I argue this always about Bangladesh, that it's irrespective of the crazy videos and all that is emerging from Bangladesh, which makes you think very weirdly, the largest population of Bangladesh does not support this kind of philosophy. They maybe have a particular religion, that is fine, but they don't support these extremist positions. So, and again, we've always seen in Bangladesh, irrespective of the circumstances, Islamic political parties have never got even
Yeah.
double-digit voter strength. And
Mm.
while their voices are very clear now, and the alternatives are very limited. That's the problem in this election. I think the alternatives are
Mm.
becoming limited, because we see Awami League as of now, the activities, there's a
Man.
ban of activities. So that's also going to be a critical bit. So, I mean, opposition is kind of, up in the air as to who would be in the opposition lead. Safe to say, we know BNP would be, getting the majority votes. But then who's going to come in the opposition in the parliament? I think that's a critical question that Bangladesh has to ask themselves.
And the NCP is also there. It's an uncertain factor, but it's there.
It is very much there, but also, again, I'm sure NCP understands that better than any one of us, that they're not likely to get too many votes. Some votes,
Mm.
yes, because there is a kind of a youth. But again, we've also seen a bit of differences of opinion within NCP at this point of
Yeah.
time. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I would really think that the best case scenario would be to have a electoral roadmap announced at some point of time. A caretaker government would come in 3 months prior to the elections, but just to maintain, law and order, and the rest will keep happening. I mean, Bangladesh has gone through terrible economic times. They're slowly
Yeah.
and steadily picking themselves away, stabilizing. The ready-made garment industry was in dismal condition when Awami Sheikh Hasina fled. It's still not in the best of health just now, but again, there has been substantial work done on that. So I think the interim government, in some ways, has tried to put the finance sector, the economic issues together, so that it doesn't like go into the rabbit hole that it was looking for. But it seemed that it was already in. But at the same time, there are many other outstanding issues which needs to be addressed. But first and foremost, social cohesion and law and order. I think once that is in place, I would say best case scenario would be elections held as roadmap. But again, as you say, there's always a black swan moment open, and we don't know what will happen. I'm hoping again that the army chief is strong. He's certainly been very, very assuring about everything, because
Yeah.
he's also seems like a very no nonsense person in terms of all these horrible Islamic sounding things that have happened. So
Mm.
again, interim and the army chief working together, and I think there has been a kind of attempt by the media here and elsewhere to, you know to allude to the fact that the differences. I don't think so at all. I think they're working together. I mean, I don't think I have any reason to doubt that. So both of them working together with the objective in mind, I think I would, really keep my fingers crossed that Bangladesh will overcome this hurdle and go towards elections by June, as they're saying. Yes.
Well, fingers crossed, Sreeradha. Let's see what happens in Bangladesh a year down the
Yes.
line. Thank you very much for that analysis and that perspective. Great talking to you. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Surya. Thank you so much.
That's all we have for you on this edition of The Gist. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media. Thank you very much. Good day.